So, what we want to do is, oh my gosh, this is starting to really annoy the crap out of me. What we want to do is take a look then at the other parts, the other two parts of the Constitution. The major parts, and if you take a look, actually, like a replica, if you will, of the Constitution is on that back wall behind Katie there, Katie and Louise. Okay, it's only 5 pages long. The entire Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, is only 5 pages long. All right, now obviously that's a replica. I have the real Declaration of Independence at home. I actually stole it from Nicolas Cage. However, the articles of the Constitution, they are the meat and potatoes of the Constitution itself. They're the ones that actually set up and establish the actual government of the United States. So, like, for example, Article 1 is the longest of the articles. Article 1 is the longest of the articles because it sets up the legislative branch. It's no secret that the Founding Fathers wanted to make the legislative branch the most powerful branch of our government. That's not a secret, because it's the only branch that is directly elected by the people. Okay? Now I know somebody's like, oh, that's not true. We're voting for president in November. No, you're not. You are not actually voting for the president. You are voting for people who will actually elect the president. You're voting for electors. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the executive branch. But when you cast your vote, you're not technically and realistically casting your vote for that guy. Okay? So they wanted the legislative branch to be the most powerful branch because they were the ones directly elected by the people. Article 2 establishes the executive branch. This is one of the biggest differences between the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. The establishment of a strong executive. There was no powerful executive under the Articles of Confederation. There will be under the Constitution. It is the president's job to execute or enforce the laws that Congress passes. That's his job, his or her. It's been a him so far, but I think it'll happen within our lifetimes. We'll have a female president. Article 3 is the shortest of them all. It's so weird. Article 3 is a paragraph, one paragraph long, that's it. And part of it is because, and the Founding Fathers talked about this, they didn't really know what to do with the judiciary. They didn't know what to do. What powers should they have? What should they be able to do? They knew they wanted one. They knew they wanted a national court system. They just didn't know what it should look like. And so if you take a look at Article 3, you'll see that it's very short and it's very non-specific. Like, for example, and we'll talk more about this obviously later, but there are all kinds of requirements to be elected to Congress. And there are all kinds of requirements to be elected president. What requirements are there to be a federal judge? Trick question. There are none. There are no requirements. You don't even have to be a freaking lawyer. Male, female, age-wise, doesn't matter. You can literally, there are no requirements. There's a lady on the United States Supreme Court right now who's never been a judge before, ever. She's been a law professor, but she's never been a judge. Totally okay, because there's no requirements. Okay? Article 4 explains the relationship of the states to each other. Basically what it does is it creates an idea that we'll talk about more, probably not tomorrow, but Friday, maybe next Monday, or next Tuesday, we'll see. Or Monday, I guess, yeah, sorry. Thinking Labor Day is this Monday, but it's actually a week from Monday. That kind of sucks. That totally ruined my moment right now. Article 4, it explains an idea called federalism. Basically, there are some things that the federal government gets to do, there are some things that the states get to do, and there are some things that they do together. They share power, which is not like it was under the Articles of Confederation. Basically, the states did everything and the national government couldn't do anything. Now, this balances it up just a little bit more. Article 5, how do you amend the Constitution? This was one of the more brilliant ideas by the Founding Fathers because they knew that America in 1789 was not going to be the same as America in 2020. It's going to change. The world's going to change. We're going to change. And the government needs to be able to change with the times. Right? Like, for example, ladies, where you at? Hey, hey, ladies, where you at? Where are my girls at? Hey. No? Ooh, let's burn our dogs. No? Nobody? Women's lib? Come on, man. Jeez Louise. Okay. This year, or actually just last week, was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. Again, as we talked about, all men are created equal, according to Thomas Jefferson. Women were excluded altogether. Right? We could talk, we could discuss African Americans or Native Americans or whoever else, but women were specifically excluded. And that won't change until 1920. Why? It's a good question. But at least we were able to pass an amendment that changed that. Okay? Article 6, this one's interesting. It basically creates something called the Supremacy Clause. In other words, if there's a state or local law that conflicts or opposes a national law, which one always wins? The national law. The Constitution and the federal government are supreme. Now, what's interesting, though, is that there are many, many examples of this where it hasn't turned out that way. Like a crazy current example. How is it that we are in our 30th some odd year of the war on drugs, and yet California, Oregon, Washington, Vermont, Colorado, New Hampshire, and Washington, D.C., you can buy recreational marijuana? How is that? Is that legal? Well, technically, no, it's not. According to the Supremacy Clause, all of that stuff is supposed to be illegal. But there's two problems. Number one, they're making an absolute crap ton of money off of weed, tax money. Okay, if you want to go to heavily funded schools, move to Colorado. Why? Because all the potheads are buying up all the weed, and now we're buying textbooks with it. Okay? Which only is maybe a bad idea because they'll use the paper inside for rolling papers. How, you get a textbook and rolling papers in the front. What was that?
But for rolling doobies.
Don't forget California.
Living in a van down by the river. Okay, but here's the problem, right? So how, and second of all, what's happening? You're not using your paper for writing, but for rolling doobies. Sorry. That tickled my funny bone. But the second thing is that, quite frankly, the federal government has chosen just to look the other way. They've chosen not to enforce this. So they know that it's illegal, but they're choosing not to enforce it anyway. It started under President Obama, and President Trump hasn't done anything about it either. So it's a very slippery slope. It's supposed to be supreme. Sometimes it only works, though, if the federal government cares enough to enforce it. By the way, not saying I agree with this, but I saw a really funny tweet the other day, and it was a guy, and it says, on the 35th anniversary of the war on drugs, I just want to congratulate drugs for winning. Because we haven't done anything to solve our drug problem in America, and some people would say, well, maybe we shouldn't. Again, what should the government be able to do? What shouldn't they be able to do? Should people have the right to do drugs if they want to? All right, last but certainly not least, this one isn't really necessary anymore, but Article 7 says the Constitution will go into effect when 9 of the 13 state legislatures have ratified it. That one doesn't make any sense anymore to us because it's already been ratified in 1789. All right, so this one really doesn't apply, but it did at the time. Okay, so this is the actual government of the United States. Some people, though, weren't happy with it. Some people said, well, what about a guarantee of our freedoms? And they're like, what? Like, of course, it's implied. We haven't said anything about taking away your rights. But some people said, no, I want it on paper that these are my rights. Okay, whatever. So James Madison sat down and he came up with 10 amendments. The original 10 amendments to the Constitution. So Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Legislative, executive, judicial. So he came up with the amendments. Which, by the way, again, it's interesting. None of these were included in the original Constitution. We had to amend it afterward. We had to add them on after the Constitution was already written. James Madison thought they were unnecessary. He thought they were unnecessary. He actually thought they were kind of dangerous. He said, well, what if I forgot a right? What if I forgot a liberty people might want? If it's not in there, does that mean we don't have it? Okay? That could be an issue. So, the first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. We currently have 27 amendments, and there are several other amendments that are on the table, but probably aren't going to be passed. So think about it. We have 27 amendments. The first 10 were passed when the Constitution was ratified. So in the last 250 years, we've only passed 17 more. In the past 250 years, we've only passed 17 more. And by the way, let's narrow that down even further. Of those 17, 3 were passed right after the Civil War. The 13th Amendment bans slavery, 14th Amendment gives them citizenship, 15th Amendment gives African American males the right to vote. Now we're down to 14. One of them enacted prohibition, and another one did away with prohibition. Now we're down to 12. Right? 12, really, were passed over the course of, say, about 240 years or so. In other words, these things don't happen very often. The most recent was passed in like 1992, and it was supposed to limit congressional pay. Okay. Right? But these don't happen very often. It's really, hey, how's it going, man? Hope I didn't break your computer there, though.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Sorry, don't worry about it. If it's broken, it's broken. It's not mine. Some friend you are. I don't know, I just beat up some third grader who took his note. What the crap? Okay. All right. So what we want to do is briefly go over the amendments, just real briefly. Okay? And especially since we're going to talk about a lot of these in way more detail here in just a moment. I tell you what, let's watch a video clip. Let's just get crazy. Let's get crazy. Let's watch a video clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about the amendments. Yeah, okay, here we go.
The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights, were ratified or passed over 200 years ago. But even though they're a bit, old, these first 10 amendments are still the most debated and discussed section of our Constitution today. So can you remember what they are? Let's take a look. The First Amendment is the freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. This may be the most revered of the amendments. The First Amendment protects our rights to say and write our opinions, worship how we please, assemble together peacefully, and petition our government if we feel the need. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. The original intent of the Second Amendment was to protect colonists from the invading British soldiers, but it now guarantees that you have the right to own a gun to defend yourself and your property. The Third Amendment is called the Quartering Amendment. It was written in response to the British occupation and as a result of the colonists having to house or quarter soldiers in their homes during the American Revolution. Because of this amendment, our government can never force us to house soldiers in our home. The Fourth Amendment is the right to search and seizure. The police can't come into our home without a search warrant and take our personal property. Today, many concerns have arisen about our rights to privacy and technology. For example, can the government track your location with your smartphone, or can social media postings such as on Facebook and Twitter be used without a warrant? On to the fifth. It's all about due process. You've probably heard the phrase, "I plead the fifth," in movies or on TV. They're talking about the Fifth Amendment, which says that you don't have to take the witness stand against yourself if you may end up incriminating yourself.
In other words, you have the right to remain.
We're halfway done. The Sixth and Seventh Amendments are about how the legal system works. If you're accused of a crime, you have the right to a speedy public trial and an impartial jury. You also have the right to a lawyer and the right to take the stand if you choose. This is important because it will prevent the accused from sitting in prison forever and insist that the prosecution proceed with undue delay. The seventh says you have the right to a jury trial where 12 impartial peers decide your innocence or guilt in the courtroom, as opposed to a judge doing it all alone. The Eighth Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Is the death penalty cruel? Is it unusual? It's hard for Americans to agree on the definitions of cruel and unusual. The Ninth and 10th Amendments are called the non-rights amendments. They say that the rights not listed in the Bill of Rights are retained by the people in the states. You have other rights that are not listed in the Constitution, and the states have the right to make their own policies, like instituting state taxes. So, now you know all 10 amendments. Can you remember them all? If not, remember this. The Bill of Rights are a crucial piece of American history, and though society has undergone many changes these past 200 and some years, the interpretation and application of these amendments are as vital today as they were when they were written.
Okay, so just a really quick summary here, because I know that went super fast and I didn't expect you to write those all down from that. So, number one, the First Amendment is, as the video I think correctly pointed out, probably the most revered, but also the most controversial. Because there's so much gray area here. In fact, we are going to talk about the First Amendment in conjunction with our second unit here, which is our next unit, which is the judicial branch. Why? Because what do you think most Supreme Court cases deal with? The First Amendment, right? So like, for example, how about this? Should businesses, like in this case, Hobby Lobby, real case by the way, should they be able to prevent their healthcare providers from providing birth control to their employees because it violates the owner's religious views? They're strong Catholics. Birth control's a no-no. So they've made that decision for their employees. It's against their religion to offer they don't believe in birth control, so they took it off of their healthcare. Is that right? Or how about this? A couple in Indiana asked a baker to bake them a wedding cake, and he refused. Why? Because it was a gay couple. It violated his religious ideas. Is that right? A guy wrote a rap song, rap lyrics about his ex-wife, posted them on Facebook. She took it as a threat. He was arrested. Is that freedom of speech?
Oh, what?
Hey? So I'm just saying, all of this is very, very applicable. Most of the cases the Supreme Court deal with the First Amendment. So that's why we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Right to bear arms. Notice that it's not the right to arm bearers. Bears are scary enough, they don't need guns. So it's the right to bear arms. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit about this in our next unit as well. Should there be limits on what types of guns people can own? And should there be limits on who can own guns? If so, what are those limits? All right? Stuff we're going to talk about. Very, very appropriate. By the way, this is one of the only good things to come out of quarantine. The number of school shootings went to 0. It's sad that not only do we have to worry about dying from a freaking virus, we have to worry about dying from each other. It's ridiculous. Anyway, number 3. This is probably the least appropriate of the amendments. No housing of soldiers in private homes. This goes way back to the Revolutionary War. We really don't have to worry about it much anymore. But let's just say this. It ticked off the founding fathers so much what the British did that they put it in the Constitution. Okay? It was just one more grievance that they had against the British. Sir?
Actually, the school shooting thing, I had someone walk by my house with a gun, so school shootings, I mean, they were smoking. So I was going to school at home,
I have a gun in my house.
so still I is.
Yeah, well, touche. Number 4, protection from unreasonable, that's the key word, by the way, unreasonable searches and seizures. By the way, I would also like to point out that this pertains to vehicles as well. It does pertain to vehicles as well. Okay, it's a lesser degree. It's not unreasonable, but you don't have to have, It's what they call reasonable suspicion, but that's a whole other story. So in other words, if cops want to come into your house to search your house, they have to have a warrant. Unless, well, let's just say this. My niece has a friend who her son got arrested because he's kind of a toolbox. He got arrested using evidence they used from her home, right? From her friend's home. And she was talking about all the cops just took all this stuff and all this evidence, and now my son's in jail, and blah, 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 blah. And they did it without a warrant. I couldn't believe it. And my niece goes, well, did you give him permission? She goes, well, yeah. Well, if you give them permission, they don't need a warrant anymore. Okay, if you say, yeah, you can search my home, what the crap did you think was going to happen? Okay. By the way, it goes also for your car. So the safest bet is if a police officer asks if they can search your car, what's the best thing to say?
Do you have a warrant?
Do you have a warrant, or just no? Yeah. Okay. Now, there are exceptions to that as well. Like if you have an open beer can in your car in plain view, they don't need a warrant anymore. Okay, because it's literally right there. So anyway, we'll talk more about this obviously later. Number 5, the video only focused on one aspect of the Fifth Amendment, but there's lots of other aspects. For example, one of them is self-incrimination. Again, this is your right to remain silent. It is their job to prove your guilt, and you don't have to help them. Don't help them prove your guilt by, well, I didn't mean to, or that's not how it went, or anything like that. Just shh, zippy the lippy. Make them prove their case on their own. Now, here's the other part. Please.
I was going to say, does Double Jeopardy go along with the movie Double Jeopardy?
Yes, absolutely. It's a cool movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, Double Jeopardy says you can only be tried for the same crime once. You can't be tried twice. So in other words, if you're a prosecutor, how many chances do you have to prove this person guilty? One, and only one. So probably the most famous, or infamous, I guess, example of this is O.J. Simpson. Yeah, if you don't think O.J. Simpson did it, you need to go join the Flat Earthers, because you're freaking nuts. Okay? He totally did it. In fact, he wrote a book later called If I Did It, in which he talked about how he did it. Like step-by-step details of how he got away, literally, with double homicide. And the really bad part for the people, the family members of the victims, is that what can they do about it? Nothing. Like literally, as soon as they said, we find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty, and he starts bawling, he could have run out of the courtroom, grabbed the nearest camera, and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got away with that. You guys are so dumb.
I mean, he had a huge lawyer, and of course, that father was the father of the Kardashians, of course.
Yeah, his lawyer, he had a whole team of lawyers. Yeah, one of them was
That's what
Robert
made them
Kardashian.
famous.
Yeah. But here's the problem. There's nothing they can do about it. As soon as he was pronounced not guilty, they couldn't do anything. Okay, now they did sue him successfully in a civil case, but there's nothing, he never saw jail for that crime because he was found not guilty, even though he freaking did it. Okay, 6, all kinds of stuff. Basically, number 6 is all about due process. In other words, if you're accused of a crime, the government has specific rules they have to follow. They have to allow you to do this. They have to allow you to do a wide variety of things, right? How about this one? Right to an attorney, also part of your Miranda rights. Okay? Number 7, really not as appropriate today, although I guess it is in some cases. You have a right to a jury trial, in other words, a jury of your peers, in cases of civil matters more than $20. Okay? So like, for example, if I loan Lawson $500 and he never pays me back, I can sue him for that. If I loaned him $15, I can't. Now, I know what you're thinking, $20, that's really not that much money. Keep in mind when this was written though. In 1789, $20 was a good sum of money. You know what I mean? Hundreds of dollars today. Number 8 is also very controversial. It does protect you from excessive bail and fines, but the one that people gravitate to is the cruel and unusual punishment. And the reason this is controversial is, as we mentioned already, what is cruel and unusual? That is open for interpretation and debate. Not to mention the fact, what is considered cruel and unusual has changed over time. Like in the old days, again, we could hang people as a capital offense, a capital crime. You can't do that anymore because oftentimes they didn't die right away, they choked to death. Okay? And that was considered cruel. Now, I would also point out, sentences, prison sentences can also be defined as cruel and unusual. Like, for example, true story, just about this summer, so let's say 3 months ago or so, a 16-year-old, I think he's now 18 or 19, appealed his prison sentence. What did he do? He got higher than a kite, went to a convenience store, tried to shoplift 2 cases of beer. The convenience store tried to stop him, so he stabbed her 35 times. Killed her. And the jury gave him 50 years for it. And he said that because of his age, 16, that was cruel and unusual. They upheld the sentence, by the way, if you're curious. But that was his lawyer's argument, that a 50-year sentence on a 16-year-old was cruel and unusual. And they said, no, what he did to her was cruel and unusual. Okay? So what is cruel and unusual? What is that? That's open for interpretation. Some people would say the death penalty is cruel and unusual. Other people would say, no, it's called justice. We'll talk a lot about that as well. Number 9, you can't use your rights to deny others their rights. So do you have the right to have a gun? Sure. Can you point that gun at people to intimidate them? No. That's bad. Right? That's not legal.
They run background
Right?
checks before
Well,
they buy the gun.
They do. So, like, for example, there was a Black Lives Matter protest that was marching past their house. Do you guys remember this? And this couple was like pointing guns at everybody as they were walking by from their home. Some people wanted them prosecuted because they claimed that they were violating their right to freedom of assembly. The couple claimed we were just protecting our property. Okay? And number 10, anything that's not listed here in the 10 amendments is still a right unless your state says so. So in some states, you can do things that in other states you can't. And some of them are really ridiculously stupid. If you don't believe me, you should go to stupidlaws.com. It is mindlessly entertaining. Like, for example, it is what is it? It's illegal to fall asleep in a cheese factory in South Dakota.
What? Really?
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, there's just all kinds of ridiculously stupid stuff, but it varies from state to state, of course. Okay. So, actually, we're going to pause on that. Go ahead, put away your guided notes, open up your computers, and go to Classroom.
Could they change the 7th to like a
I'm sorry.
Could they change the 7th or is it?
Okay, so to change it, they would have to have an amendment for the amendment. They could, for sure.
Yeah.
They could, for sure. The problem is, I just don't think anybody cares enough to do it.
You're
You know?
gonna sue someone over
Exactly.
$80.
Right, so to like, to change an amendment would be just like prohibition. You'd have to pass another amendment to change the amendment.
Yeah.
But yeah, $20, it seems a little illogical, doesn't it? Yeah. All right, so I want you to open up the document that says Doomsday Device. Everybody see where I am? Go to Classroom, you'll have to hover above it. I'm sorry about that. It says Doomsday Device. Yeah, everybody see me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Picking up what I'm stepping in? Whoa, bless you. Okay, so follow along, and I'll tell you exactly what we need to do, and you'll have the rest of the hour to do it. Okay? Here we go. The background. And by the way, this is completely hypothetical, so don't freak out. A mad scientist in the Nevada desert named Mr. Lovern has developed a devastating nuclear device capable of destroying the continental United States. Actually, this sounds something like more than Mr. Statham would do. He has distributed directives to all media demanding that the public tune into his bulletin at 9 a.m. this morning. And he says, I have observed the deterioration of American society during the past 20 years, and I have determined its cause. Not only are Americans lazy and apathetic, meaning they just don't care, but they have become so used to having too many rights. They take these rights for granted and therefore don't understand or comprehend them. That's one of my favorite things, is to watch like a video or whatever, and you see some Karen screaming at somebody, and she's like, I know my rights. 95% of the time when people say that, they have no freaking clue what their rights are. Okay? So it's kind of entertaining, and make sure you, if you're going to say something like that, better make sure you do. So this is leading, right, to a permissive, corrupt, disorganized situation in our country. Either we reduce the number of Bill of Rights guarantees, or I will detonate my bomb at 10 p.m. tonight. I have decided that 5 of the following 10 rights may be maintained, but 5 must be eliminated. Now, by the way, notice I went by rights. I didn't go by amendment, because a lot of the amendments have more than one right. Like the First Amendment has 4. Okay? So we went by rights, not by amendments. So I've determined that 5 of the following 10 may be maintained, but 5 must be eliminated. Cross the 5 off the list below. And by the way, I'll show you how to use the strike through function. It's super easy. For those who don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to strike it through and cross it off. So you're gonna cross off 5 of them, 5 of the 10. The remaining 5, I want you to organize, or maybe not organize, but list, number them 1 through 5. Now listen carefully. We're actually going in reverse order. So 5 is the most important. 4 is the next, 3 next, and 1 would be, of course, your last choice. Still important, because you kept it on the list, but of the 5, you would rank that last. Does that make sense? So 5 is the most important, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? And then write just a little bit of a justification for those choices. Why did you keep the 5 that you chose? Why did you keep the 5 that you chose? Okay? What was that? Oh, so something automatic on your thing. Okay, not a problem. Okay, so to strike through what you want, everybody follow me if you would. Hold on, we'll go here. All right, whatever. So go to format, and if you go to text, which it won't let me do because my computer's being stupid, go to text, and you should see the strike through option there. Everybody see that? So in other words, highlight what you don't want. Highlight the 5 you don't want. Highlight them, okay? And then go to text, or excuse me, format, text, strike through, and it'll cross that one off. Make sense? So again, cross off 5. The 5 you're keeping, organize in descending order, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then explain why you kept them. Okay? Go.